So they don't follow human
Nothing
rules.
says you have to have a fairy deck for any of these spreads or any of this
Everybody
work.
categorizes the Fae in a little bit different way. I don't really know when all of this started. Perhaps I'll start from the beginning. I've always enjoyed fantasy, with fairies, dragons, and mermaids. I fell in love with sassy Tinkerbell as a child and the heartbreaking story of the last unicorn. And then people started gifting me fairy-related things as far back as I can remember. I've been collecting fairy figures and such forever. If it had a fairy on it, people would get it for me. Hi everyone, Summer with AstariaSen, and welcome to week 1 of Finding the Fae. I am so excited for this week as we are going to explore how I got started on Fae work, and we're gonna talk about how we can get involved with the Fae if we're just beginning. And we're gonna start some foundational work, start some invitational work, start some real more internal thought processes about what the Fae actually are. Like, what constitutes a fairy? What constitutes Fae? And we're also going to explore maybe some of the benefits of working with the Fae this week. While I may not know exactly when all the fairy stuff started for me, I do know when I actually felt the call to work with anything fairy related. It was a pretty dark time in my life. I was lonely, and my best friend at the time decided we were no longer friends. My girls were rarely home as teenagers, and my husband worked out of town most of the time. I was sitting in my living room. I had just found some pagan-related content at the library and on YouTube. This was back in 2019. And I came across a tarot video. Now, I didn't know the difference between tarot and oracle at the time, but back in 2005, I was gifted the Amy Brown Fairy Wisdom Oracle. It literally sat on my bookshelf, never opened until this night in 2019. That's 14 years I had this deck without doing anything with it. Suddenly, though, I felt called to open it and actually start working with it. This both began my tarot tube journey and the start of my fairy spirituality, even though I didn't really know that at the time. Maybe I'll start with categories, like what kinds of Fae are there? How do we know them? And all those different kinds of things. There's a lot of authors who write about the Fae, and they all kind of have their own idea on it, but I think we're going to start with maybe some Brian Froud here. So inside this book, Fairies by Brian Froud, he actually has a note on terminology that I would really like to share with you because it kind of defines all of the Fae stuff. He says, nomenclature is difficult in fairy. The same fairy species may have various names according to the region. The denizens of fairy are so varied that in the past some have been wrongly or carelessly categorized. One species shades into the next, so it is difficult to state precisely where a bogey ends and a boggle begins. And what of the shape-shifting fairies? In one form, they might be in one category, and in another form, a quite different one. Hence, no sensible rules apply to terminology or, indeed, any other aspect of fairy. It is a law unto itself, and all we can do is the best we can to clarify with the current facts we have available. Out of all the people who I have read, Froud is the one I connect to the most about how I feel towards fairies and even categorizing them, because there are so many different kinds and they're so fluid. And everybody categorizes the Fae in a little bit different way. Brian Froud himself, he has over 30 different kinds of Fae he talks about in different ways in all of his books. You have Iris, how do you pronounce it? Compie, Compiea. She did Fairies at the Fault Lines book, and she had 10 different fairy categories that she put them in. And then you can even go further. Like there is Morgan Daimler. She categorizes, she did a dictionary of all of the Fae, and in there she has the fairy queens, and she has the kinds of Fae like bogarts and gnomes and all that kind of stuff, plus the different specific Fae like a queen fairy, a specific like Queen Mab, or something like that. So they're all inside that dictionary, and that's how she categorized them. And then you go to Thomas Kitely, who has categorized them by regions, and all the different regions, each one has their own version of Fae and different stories that go with that. So categorizing Fae, just as much as anything else about the Fae, kind of contradicts itself too. There are people who believe that fairies are angels and that they are gods and goddesses. There are people who believe fairies are just other little people. There are people who believe that fairies come from all over the place, doing all kinds of things, including being ghosts of people who have passed. The idea of categorizing fairies is a very difficult one. But you can do basic stuff. Like Fae is a general term. You can categorize fairy into Fae because Fae can be generalized, like pagan is generalized, right? So Fae can encompass fairies, it can be elves, it could be gnomes, it could be bogarts, it could be mermaids, it could be nightmares, it could be unicorns. I mean, it's endless, like the endless categories. Even hag sometimes falls under Fae categories. It just depends on who you're reading and how you feel personally about them, because personal gnosis really comes into play for a lot of fairy stuff, a lot of fairy stuff. And you'll learn as you go. It's not like you have to know all the categories right now. Right now, it's just about knowing that it is hard to categorize them. It's hard to fit them in a little tiny human box because they're not human. So they don't follow human rules. And humans, we want to categorize things. We want to put labels on things. We want to do these kinds of things. So it's sometimes hard for us to wrap our brains around the idea of they can be shifting. They can shift in and out of different categories, as Froud was speaking of. So that's just an aspect to keep in mind. And anytime you read a book, the author who is writing it, if they're categorizing it, it's going to be in their own way and the way that they view the fairies. They can categorize them by seasons. They can categorize them by flora or fauna. They can categorize them even as Brian Froud has gone as far as good fairies, bad fairies, right? So it's an endless option. Unfortunately, it's not like I can pinpoint exact facts for you in that way, because it doesn't work that way. Fairies don't play by our rules, even if we want them to. So I also wanted to talk about reasons you might want to actually work with the Fae, like what the benefits of working with the Fae are. So before I go on with these trains of thoughts that I'm interrupting right now, I also forgot to mention and just wanted to touch base a tiny little bit on fear of the Fae, because that is very real and it is a big part of why a lot of people don't want to work with the Fae. And that fear can be a very, very big block in anything to do with the Fae. If they're reaching out to you and you are afraid of it, it's going to make it very difficult to hear them, to understand them, to see them, okay? So what I would like to say about that is, well, yes, there are both good and bad fairies, right? Just like there's two sides to a god, there's the good side and the bad side. They are not necessarily just out to get you. Now, the old folklore does have a lot of that in it, but that's also a time when people were trying to understand what was happening with other people, which is where like changelings can come in. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I believe it all exists. I just think that the Fae have been more demonized than what they might actually be from my own experience. There's going to be Fae who might not want to work with you, and they might cause a little bit more trouble. And if you don't want that, that's cool. All you have to do is let them know, and they'll just generally stop. They have boundaries, just like a person has boundaries, just like a god has boundaries. And so you just have to like rework your brain in understanding that when you work with a god or goddess, like say Hecate, it has both sides, both aspects, and the Fae have that too. As long as you keep your promises, as long as you do what you say you're going to do, they will generally be okay. Don't lie to them. don't Don't try to manipulate them. Don't try to just use everything for your own gain and give nothing in return, because that's what's going to upset them. That's where it gets more complicated. And yes, a lot of the more Irish Celtic culture relies heavily on the fact that Fae don't like to be talked about. They don't like to hear bad things about themselves. Do you? People don't like to hear bad things about themselves, so they often refer to them as the good folk to keep their ire away. But that's natural. That's just the way that it works. And there's a lot that's contradicting of fairy, and you're going to find a lot of that in the folklore and in books that I even suggest to you. Different people will see it different ways, including how to be fearful of them and how much fear you should have. So I fully hope that if you are afraid of working with the Fae, you will at least take a moment to consider why, and consider if maybe you might still want to try. I mean, fear's healthy, and if that's what it is, that's what it is, and that's okay. But in my experience, I've had nothing to worry about. Even when I've broken something that I said I was going to do, nothing horrible happened to me. Okay, it doesn't mean it can't or won't or anything like that. I just want to put it out there that the fear is natural, but it is natural in anything that you're working with of this type, whether you're working with nature, gods, goddesses, or fae. Okay, so back to the regular scheduled program. So some of the benefits I have personally found working with the Fae has been my connection to nature and land out here, and their help with my animals. They also have a lot of curiosity, and I find that intriguing. I find it kind of leads me back to joy in a way, because they're curious about everything. They're curious about also. Hi, Sasha. Sorry. They're curious about everything. The ones that want to work with humans are curious about human nature. Okay, so I often work with nature and the Fae, and it's getting back into that nature aspect from living in the city to moving off grid. That's really helped me. That's one of the benefits that's been a huge deal for me with working with the Fae. I have a whole list of possible things that are helpful for people that I've come across. Some of them, like seeing the world in a new way. Of course, the Fae aren't like us. They have their own rules, their own way of life. And so sometimes when we're interacting with them, it's like the hanged man, where we're turning ourselves upside down so we can view it in a way that makes more sense. I hope that makes sense. And I do believe that they also encourage play and they encourage creativity. A lot of my creativity comes from fairy work and sometimes even divine, right? It's not so easy to break it all down, and each benefit is very individual. It's extremely individual. But here are some other things that I have come across along the way, okay? You can align with the seasons and the cycles, with the moon work, with Sabbats, with gardens, right? So a lot of that nature is coming into play. Deeper looking and trusting into yourself, and being more aware of like subtle energies that might be surrounding you, because the Fae aren't always like right there in your face, right? So there's a subtlety about a subtle, I can say the word, I promise, but there is something about them that is a lot softer and may not be as in your face. And sometimes when we make ourselves aware of that kind of energy, it opens us up to more intuitive things as well. Let's see, being able to work around energetic boundaries, consent, and offerings, because Fae have that. That's a big deal for them. Boundaries, consent, keeping your promises. It's like it's kind of like a whole dedication in its own way, right? Like anytime you work with anything, whether it's Fae, gods or goddesses, just nature spirits, or just divine, you're working within a set of standards that works for your craft, that works for your spirituality, that works within whatever it is you're doing for your way of life, or how you want to see the world and experience it, right? So the Fae just have a little bit more topsy-turvy and maybe a few more stricter rules. I mean, gods and goddesses, come on. I mean, they can bear down, right? Like, strike down with lightning kind of stuff. That's pretty harsh, right? The Fae aren't any different than that. They're gonna have stuff like that too that you're gonna come across. But let's see, other stuff you can do is invoking Sacred Rebellion and the Wild Self, because the Fae are a more wild type of energy. They're not confined within our human bounds or societal norms, So they can represent like a freedom, a wildness, even a resistance to the things going on in our lives, right? And working with them can awaken all that rebellion that might be pent up inside, and it could be kind of fun to explore, right? It also breaks free so sometimes when we get into spirituality, whether it's an organized religion or some kind of spirituality that we're working on, there are certain ways about it, right? Wicca has a certain way, Christianity has a certain way, all the stuff that we do has a certain way, but the Fae don't work that way. They like break down that kind of dogma. They don't work within it. They don't work within over sanitized spiritual paths. Because they trip everything up. They throw it on its head, and even the human rules that apply to that, it's not them. Which does make some difficulty in working with them. It's kind of a practice. Like, you got to continue to practice and continue to try and continue to work it out with them. But still, they encourage, despite all that, they encourage you to reclaim your intuitive nature more, and more of a wild, authentic way that might have not been there before. And that's just some of the benefits that I have come up with. I'm sure there's many, 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 many more that other people who have worked with the Fae have come across too. I mean, feel free to share those down in the comments if you want to. But I think that the benefits of working with the Fae, even if you're just trying it out, you don't have to continue your work with the Fae. You could just dabble. You could be like, hey, how you doing? See if you get any reactions. If you're just curious about all this, that's fine. Like, there's nothing that says you have to go hardcore into some Fae spirituality like I am. This is what I do. I do this regularly. It is my spiritual path. I do not see the Fae as my god or goddess or something like that, but I honor them. I respect them, and they are a part of my spiritual practice because I work with them daily on my land and within my work, including my tarot. So speaking of tarot, this week has a tarot spread as well. So I definitely wanted to do that with you, and we have some journal prompts. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to turn you around now, and we are going to explore a tarot spread with some fun tarot stuff in that, and I will tell you what the journal prompts are that you can work on this week, and then later in the week we will have our second foundation and invitation video coming. So let me turn you around.
All right, so before I actually get into the tarot reading, I wanted to touch base on the journal prompt, and it doesn't have to be a journal prompt. You could do a VR video to it instead or something like that if you want to, but in case people wanted to journal it instead of do a video on it, I have it available. I will put it up on the screen here, but basically what it is the journal prompt is, how do you define the Fae, and what do you already believe about them? What is it? What is your belief already about them? And then, for further journaling, you can do like a 3-minute brain dump about all the things that come to your head about the Fae, just so you can get a clear idea of where you stand, or maybe get out some of those fears, or maybe get out some other things that you might just know, but you're not even sure where, but you could just write it all down on the page. But anyways, if you want to do a video VR to that would be amazing. I would love to see everybody's definition of Fae. And do the tarot spread. So here's the tarot spread. It's the Fae Foundation spread. I will put it up here on the screen for a moment, and then we are going to get going on the Fae Foundation spread. I want to let you know that you can use regular tarot decks. Nothing says you have to have a fairy deck for any of these spreads or any of this work. I do have a lot of fairy tarot decks, so I will be using them throughout the month. But for this first one, I am using the deck my husband bought me forever ago. The box is all tore up, but it's a great deck. It's a great little RWS, and I thought I would just show you that it won't matter if you just use a regular tarot deck or not, okay? So the first the first question, sorry about that. The first question is, how can working with the Fae benefit me? Now, I know that I already work with the Fae and all that other stuff, but I can still benefit from asking the question. So that's what we're going to do. I'm gonna run with these journal prompts and see where they take me. Gosh, this deck just shuffles so good. Okay, so let's see. How can working with the Fae benefit me? There's my card. How can working with the Fae benefit me? Interesting. Okay, the next question. What fear of the Fae might I be holding on to? What fear of the Fae? There we go. Interesting. Okay. Next question. Question number 3. How can I address this fear? Woo! Wow, that happened fast. I'm going to go ahead and put it right here with it because it kind of goes together, okay? Oh, interesting. Oh, boy. All right, 4. What first foundational steps could I take? Woo, that was fast. There we go. And number 5. What aspect of the Fae do I need to understand right now? What aspect of the Fae do I need to understand right now? So I've been shuffling for a while and it clearly does not want to come out. So I think that I need to use my oracle card for this question. And so I went ahead and got my very first deck ever, fairy deck ever deck. And I'm going to use that. So let's ask this deck that question and see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and give it a shuffle first. Oh, man. Now I want you to shuffle. Come on. All right. Let's see if we can get an answer now. Okay. What aspect of the Fae do I need to understand right now? There it is. All right. Interesting. Dandelions. Oh my gosh, you guys have no idea how much I love dandelions. Okay. Wow. Okay, and I've got to grab the book for that one. Here it is. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll just move this over to the side for now. Okay, so we got, the first question is, how can working with the Fae benefit me? So then I've got the 9 of Wands. 9 of Wands. That's defense, right? Like you're defending something. I am not all the way up to date, up to date on all my stuff. A battle-wearied man stands before a phalanx of wands gathered in defense against the next battle to come. Okay. So his position is secure and only has one self-doubt, and only his own self-doubt can shake it. Okay. So how can working with the Fae benefit me? I think that, wow. I think it helps me. I think it helps strengthen me, like giving me the inner strength to stand up for the things that I believe in. I think that's one of the benefits I am gaining from working with the Fae, because there's not a lot of people who work with the Fae, and when you tell them you work with the Fae, you get looks, okay? I'm just saying, you get looks, okay? All right, so the next one's, what fear of the Fae might I be holding on to? Fear of the Fae. This is judgment. I am pretty sure that is judgment, and judgment, I don't know that I'm afraid of judgment from the Fae. I think that sometimes I might fear judgment from other people or even myself, because it's hard to work with something that people don't believe in. Lots of people do judge that, and sometimes it's difficult. So the next one, how can I address this fear? And I think that's the Emperor, isn't it? It's number 4. 4. Yeah, the Emperor. Okay. I don't have the Emperor memorized so well. The Emperor is embodiment of civilization and its domain over nature. The orb in his left hand represents dominion. It is the world, which is his command. The scepter in his right hand is his symbol of authority. He who holds the scepter is recognized as rightful leader who is deserving of respect. Ah, that did not help me. I don't know what the Emperor means. So I'm going to go with, I think the Hierophant is knowledge. So the Emperor is confident. I can go with confidence. So I'm just going to go with that. The idea of building that confidence will help me alleviate some of this fear, I think. All right. Number 4, what first foundational steps can I take? And we have the Queen of Cups. I'm going to say belief. I think belief is one of the basic and most appropriate foundational steps. And I put my heart into that belief. And I think that's where this Queen of Cups come in. I think that's where that comes in. All right, number 5. That's my oracle card that apparently decided that needed to be instead. And it is, what aspect of the Fae do I need to understand right now? And we got number 40, which is the dandelion. Wear yellow today. There's a chant inside this book. It says, one side dark and one side light. Which one might I choose tonight? I cast about some fairy dust and call upon those whom I trust. Ancient ones who are protective, show me how to use perspective. So be it. So the fairies plant their seeds with great care. They choose the very best ones and water and nurture them tenderly. The plants grow and the crops come in, and with them, they bring more perfect seeds in the next planting. Realize that your project onto yourself, others, and situations, that which you project, your thoughts and words are the seeds of that you plant. So, what aspect of the Fae do I need to understand right now? I think that it's telling me what I see as reality may not be what somebody else sees as reality, right? The Fae are ever changing. And I could just work on my personal gnosis, right? Of understanding the Fae and within my practice and within my daily work. I don't need to worry about what other people or how other people view the Fae. How I receive something is a reflection of my own emotions. So how I see the Fae is also a reflection of how I kind of see myself. All right, so later this week in a couple days, the next video is going to be about getting started. Offerings, working with altars, inviting the Fae in, that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to be working on later on this week. So I will see you with another video here in just a few days. I hope you guys have a very great day.